this section is called dividing polynomials. Now, dividing polynomials, here's another, this is another Fort Bend video, and it's on just dividing polynomials, and the guy's name is Mr. Whittington, and he's very good, and you would find this is good. Now, my video is also going to be on the link with the YouTube videos for Greenwood Math videos, so you can watch it on there from the notes that we have here. Now, when you're dividing the polynomial has to be in a form that looks like this, okay? X plus something or X minus something, and you want the X to only have a 1 on the front of it. Alright, when it works like that, we're going to use this process, and we're going to use a process called synthetic division. Now, synthetic is kind of like man-made or made-up type thing, and so it's kind of like that. But if we were to divide the polynomial by a binomial on the bottom and just a polynomial on the top, we could use old school division. You know, like if we had a number to divide, say I was going to take 72 and I was going to divide it by 2. Alright, 2 times what gets you close to 7? Well, that would be a 3. Okay, then I'm going to say 3 times 2, that gives me 6. Then I'm going to subtract. So 7 minus 6 would be 1. I'm going to bring down the next number, that'd be a 2. How many times 2 times what gets me close to 12? Well, that would be a 6. Multiply it back. 2 times 6, there we go. Subtract, I get a remainder of 0. Now, this is the division process with numbers. You can do that same division process right here. I'll explain a little bit of it because that's technically what we're doing. But I'll show you kind of how it works, and then we're going to do it with synthetic division that makes it a whole lot easier for you. So here I'm going to ask it like that. X times what will give me a 3x cubed? So I need to think, what do I have to multiply the x by to get this as an answer? Well, it would need to be multiplied by a 3 to get the 3. And since I only have one x here and I need to get cubed, I would need 2 more. So I would multiply 3x cubed. Squared. 3x squared. Now when I multiply it back, 3x squared times x would give me 3x cubed. Then 3x squared times 3 would give me positive 9x squared. Now the thing over here was I had to subtract the 6 from the 7. Well, now I have 2 things up here. So what I have to do is I have to end up subtracting both of them. So that means this becomes negative 3 and this becomes negative 9. So this just changes the signs on both of them. So you can draw your line and then you can just switch your signs like that. Now 3 minus 3 means that goes to 0. Then I have a positive 7, and this is going to be a negative 9, so that's negative 2x squared. Then I'm going to bring down the next number. There's negative 4x. And so you can see, as we did this problem, this would continue on down and do the very similar thing, and we get an answer up here. Now, what we're going to do and what you'll do on your homework and what this video shows you and what I show you on these notes is the process to do it without having all these variables in here. Okay? So what we do is we take the opposite of what this plus or minus is. Okay? So because it said x plus 3, I'm going to take this 3 and this 3, I'm going to put it down, I'm going to use the opposite. Okay? Use the opposite number and put it in the little outside, in a box on the outside. Okay? Then you're going to draw the line. Here is only the numbers. That's the 3, there's the 7, there's the negative 4, and there's the 3. So we're not going to worry about the variables, we're just going to put the coefficients down. So I took the 3 out of the x cubed, I took the 7 off the x squared, I took the negative 4 off of the x, and I took the constant 3 and put a 3. Now here's how we get started. to get our answer, like here we got 36, okay, to get our answer that would fall in right up here, we're just going to do it down here. So the arrow there says bring down that first number, so the first number is going to come down. Now I'm going to multiply -3 times 3, that would be -9, and then I'm just going to add the numbers. +7 and a -9 would give me -2. Then I'm going to go back to my -3. -3 times -2 would give me 6. +6. Okay, a -4 and a +6 is a 2. Then we'll go back here. -3 times 2 would be -6. +3 and a -6 means I've got a remainder left over here. I've got a little bit extra. See, if this number had been a different number besides 2, it wouldn't have divided evenly and we would have had a remainder. So now here's what happens. We started out with an x cubed on our problem, and we divided by an x plus a 3. So we're dividing off one of the powers. So our answer has to be reduced down by power. So taking some power out of it, this would be 3x squared, because it started out with a cube, so I got to take a power out. So x squared, then minus 2x, then the last term would be plus 2. So when you get your answer, you take your power out by 1. So this becomes x squared, this would become x to the first, and this would become just x to the 0, or just a constant. But what am I going to do with this remainder? Okay? In division properties, you take the remainder and you stick it over what you divided by. Now here, we have to stick this remainder over our divided property right here is what we're dividing by. Okay? So we would say this would be minus 3 over x plus 3. Now when we write our final answer, we have to go back to the original. Okay, so we have to go back to this, and that's what has to end up down here on the bottom. Okay, has to be there. Now on your homework, if this is negative, then you need to put a negative right here. Okay, if you don't, if you put that a plus and that a minus, they're going to count it wrong, and I can't tell you why, but that just does. So be careful. If your answer, if your remainder is negative, put a minus here, and then put the number over what you originally were to divide by. Because we're not dividing by old school long division, we're using a magical synthetic division to do it. But we still have to remember that what we're working on is actually this. Alright, the number in front of the box is always the opposite of the number in the binomial. Always the opposite of the number in a binomial. So here we put in a -3 instead of a +3 because it had a +3, so we make -3. Okay? After we complete at the bottom of the line, we got to replace the variables, and the first term will have a variable that has a power that's 1 less than the original polynomial. So our answer powers, our powers on our answer have to be 1 less than what we started with. So if we started with cubed, we're going to start here with squared and then work our way down. Alright? Alright, let's try another one. Okay, so it has just an x to the first power. An x with a number, just a 1 in front of it. You wouldn't want to do this synthetic division if there was a number in front of the x that you're dividing here, so you just wouldn't do that. If you watch the video that I have posted up here, Mr. Whittington explains that at the very beginning of how you can make sure that you know how you should be dividing. Alright, so I'm going to make my little box on the outside, and I'm going to draw me a line a little bit down, and then I'm going to put in my number. So -3, the opposite of this number, okay, opposite, goes in my outside box. Then I'm going to look at my coefficients. So the first term, x cubed, has a 1 on the front of it. The second term, the x squared, has a 7 on the term. The next term has a 17, and the next constant is a 15. Now the 1 I'm going to bring down, so draw your little arrow and bring it underneath the bar, and then you're just going to start multiplying. So I have negative 3 times 1 would just be negative 3. Then go back and combine and add 7 minus 3, or a positive 7 and a negative 3 would just be 4. Then start multiplying again. Negative 3 times 4 would be negative 12. 17 minus 12 would be 5. Negative 3 times 5 would be negative 15. And we put a little box down here. This is our remainder box. The remainder, positive 15, negative 15, would be 0. So this time I'm not going to have anything left over at the end. So I'm going to go back up and look. I need to put the variables back in. So my power started out cubed, and I have to drop it down. So this would become x squared, 4x plus 5. And this would be your final answer. Okay, it doesn't take up much space. That long division one, if we were to do this, it would take up more space than I even have right there. Alright, let's do another one. My number that that's going to go in my box has to be the opposite of this. So my box number outside here is going to be positive 3 this time. My coefficients, I have a 4, so that would be a 1 on the front. I have an x cubed, so that would be negative 4. I have an x squared, that'd be a 5. And I have an x to the first, would be negative 6. And then I have a 1 by itself. I'm going to bring down that first number. So there's 1. 3 times 1 would be 3. Negative 4 and a positive 3 would be negative 1. 3 times negative 1 would be negative 3. 5 minus 3 is 2. 3 times 2 would be 6. Negative 6 and positive 6 would be a 0. 3 times 0 would be 0. So my remainder, I have a positive 1 left over. Now when I go back and put the variables in, this started out in the first problem originally was a 4th power. So my answer has to drop down 1. So my answer is going to drop down to be x to the 3rd. Then my powers just go down by 1. So minus x squared. Next power would be 2x. And notice I don't have any x's here. I don't have any constants. My number would be a 0 right there, so I don't have to write that. But I do have a remainder. So my remainder would be positive 1, so I'm going to put plus 1. But what did I originally divide by? This is the denominator of your remainder. So it would be x minus 3. And this would be your answer. Alright, let's try these last two. My box number is going to be the opposite of this. So my outside box is going to have a 5. And then I'm going to start with my powers. Here's 4, 3, 2. There's no x to the firsts. Well, that means I have to put a place for it. I have to put a place for it. So watch what happens. I have a 3. I have a negative 21. I have a 31. But I don't have any x to the first powers. So I have to provide a place for it. It's just like in regular numbers. If you write the number 10, you have 1 in the tens and none in the ones. So you have to put a 0 behind the for a 10. So here I need to put a 0, and this would have been for my x's because there are no x's in the problem. And then I write the negative 25. I'm going to draw my line. I'm going to bring down my first number. Okay, so anytime you have a place of a power that's missing, you have to fill in a 0 in what would be its spot. Because right here, we're missing the x's. Okay, that's where that comes to. We have 0 x's, so we have to put a spot for it. Now, bring the 3 down and start multiplying. Okay, if you need a calculator, get a calculator to do this. You can pretty much do it all on a calculator. 3 times 5 would be 15. That would be -6. 5 times -6 would be -30. So that would be +1. 1 times 5 would be 5. 0 plus 5 would be 5. And 5 times 5 would be 25. So my last box down here, -25 and +25, means my remainder is 0. So it comes out to be pretty good. Now, I started out with the x to the 4th. So my answer has to drop down by 1 power. So that would be 3x to the 3rd minus 6x squared plus x plus 5. And you have no remainder because it came out to be a 0. That would be your final answer. Alright, number 4. Notice we have an x to the 6th, and then we don't have anything else until we get to a constant. So we've got to put in a whole bunch of zeros because every power that's missing has to have a place. So I would start out with, I'm going to divide by a -1 in my box. Okay, I always have to use the opposite of that. And now I start. My power is a 1 for x to the 6th. Then I have no x to the 5th, so I have to put a 0. I have no x to the 4th, so I have to put a 0. I have no x to the 3rd, so I have to put a 0. So this would be x to the 5th, x to the 4th, x to the 3rd, 0 x squares, 0 x's, and then I have -1. So I have a 1 at the front and a -1 at the back, and zeros for all the rest of the variables that didn't fall into the place right here. So now I'm going to draw my box down and bring down the 1. So bring down the 1. 1 times 1, -1 times 1 would be -1. So this would be -1. Negative times negative. Now I get +1. 0 plus 1 is 1. -1 times 1 would be -1. Add 0 and a -1 would be -1. Multiply. -1 times -1 would be +1. Bring it down. 0 plus 1 is 1. -1 times 1 would be -1. Bring it down. 0 plus a -1 would be -1. Now I'm all the way to the end. -1 times -1 is +1. -1, +1, my remainder is 0. So my first power is going to be down 1. So this one gets x to the 5th. This next one gets -1 x to the 4th. Then I have +1 x third. -1 x squared, or just -x squared. Then +1 x. And then a constant, -1. And that, my dear friends, is your final answer. I hope you enjoy doing synthetic division. It's pretty quick. It's really pretty easy.